Hi everyone, it's Kelly. I'm back again with another scrapbooking process video. For today's layout, I am starting with a pattern paper from the Pink Paisley Citrus Bliss collection, and I am going to be applying some mixed media to this layout. Off camera, I added a layer of clear gesso and allowed that to dry, and now I'm coming in with some shimmers. It is the No Yoking colorings, and I had saw on the Hip Kit Club Instagram feed, I think it was Kim Watson, where she had sprayed the mist onto a piece of packaging and then used a brayer to apply that color to the layout. I really liked how that looked. It gave the mixed media a controlled look, but I got a little impatient when I was doing it because the color wasn't going on as thick as I wanted. So I did do the packaging technique also with this layout. So I'm just applying any leftover color after I had run the brayer on the plastic onto the pattern paper there just to get a little bit more color. Now my lighting for this video may look a little bit different from previous videos. It's hard for me to tell on this editing screen that I'm using, but I am trying something a little bit different. I'm using natural light in this video versus the studio lights that I normally use. It is starting to get pretty warm here in Indiana, and we didn't have our air conditioning on this day, and my scrapbook room is on our second story, and it was a little warm up there, and the studio lights that I use get really hot. So I was going to try this and see how it looks. So I'm hoping once I get this video edited and published that the lighting looks okay. But if it doesn't, I'll go back to using my studio lights. Okay, so I'm moving on to my photo mat cluster, and I had pulled out some papers from my stash. This layout is almost entirely just products from my stash. I am trying desperately to use up some papers and embellishments and different things that have been sitting in my drawers and in my units for months. Some of these things have even been in there for years. So I have a couple pieces from an Amy Tangerine collection. I believe it is the Finders Keepers collection. That die cut piece with the chevrons, I'm not sure where that is from. It was just kind of with some random papers that I had. I did add a doily and also some Tim Holtz tags. And then this is a Heidi Swapp frame that I ran through my Mink using some mint foil. And here I had gotten the layers not quite the way that I wanted. So I'm trying to fit that frame underneath my white cardstock photo mat, but it just wasn't fitting. So I ended up taking the staples up and just reapplying and re-adhering everything down. I like to use my Close to My Heart mini stapler. It's really comparable to the Tim Holtz tiny attacher to get these layers the way that I like. That way I know that they're not going to shift around and move, and I can kind of move it as one cohesive unit around the page until I find the place that I want to put it. Now that I have the photo mat cluster arranged the way that I like, I did bring in a burlap. I don't know if it's really burlap, but it's kind of that same material. It's a Prima flower, again, that I've had in my stash for years. I think I've had it for 4 years, maybe even longer. And now I'm going to come in with my title work. This is a cut file from the Hip Kit Club, and I use Cricut Design Space to weld some things together and just to create kind of a long flowy title. Now what I'm doing is I am going to back that orange paper, which is from the Citrus Bliss collection, onto a piece of wood grain paper that I've had in my stash for quite some time. I'm just going to slightly offset the two pattern papers just to give that wood grain kind of the shadow effect behind the orange paper. I've done this technique before, but I was recently inspired by one of Missy Whitten's process videos where she offset the two cut files, and she inspired me to give that another go. So thank you, Missy. And now I actually reprinted my photo. It may look a little bit different than my original, and I cropped it a little bit differently. So I'm having to trim my white cardstock mat. I altered the photo slightly. I darkened the background and kind of muted it out. I gave it a blurred look so that way my son was a little bit more in the forefront. I felt that the original photo, the background was just a little too busy and he was kind of lost with the carpet and the furniture that was behind him. This picture is of my son at a wedding shower for my sister-in-law, and it was the he said, she said game. I think that's what it's called, where the maid of honor would read certain things that were said either by the bride or the groom. If you thought it was the groom, you held up the mustache. If you thought it was the bride, then it was a set of lips. It's attached to like a popsicle stick. And he just thought that the mustaches were really cool. So I snapped this picture of him while he was holding it up to his face. And I just thought it was a cute picture of him. Okay, so now that I have the photo mat back to the way that I like, I'm going to bring in my long reach stapler and I'm going to staple that down onto the layout. I love my long reach stapler. I absolutely 100% know that that photo mat is not going to shift, that the adhesive is not going to fall off. I have that trouble where I go through my old scrapbooks and I'm flipping through and I notice things have come loose because my adhesive over time just has lost its tackiness and it's just fallen off the page. So I love knowing that the staples will stay put. All right, so you may have noticed that my paper is a little warped and a little wavy. That pattern paper was from a paper pad, so it was single-sided. I've noticed that sometimes with the paper pads, the paper isn't quite as thick. It doesn't really have that cardstock feel to it, and so it tends to warp and buckle a little bit easier. So I'm just adhering it down to a sheet of white cardstock just to give it a little bit more strength, I guess is the word that I'm looking for. It's just gonna make it a little bit more solid and a little bit more easy to manage. So this is my basic design. I like how it's looking. I like that the title is flowing. I'm just trimming off. I didn't get the paper adhered onto that white cardstock very straight, so there were some pieces hanging out. So I was just trimming off any white cardstock that was visible. And I really like the design. I like how the title kind of flows from the top to the bottom and his photo stands out. But I feel like the title still is getting a little bit lost. So I'm just going to go ahead and adhere this down using my fine line bottle, which I still am absolutely loving. I am so glad that I invested in one of those. It's the best thing ever. Okay, so what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna bring in this piece of wood grain paper that you're gonna see here. And what I'm showing you is that this paper is really not my style. I have a hard time using papers that have big, bold patterns or designs kind of tilted off into one corner. I just have a hard time figuring out what to do or how to position things. But a large majority of that paper was wood grain, and which I know I can use for something. So when I have papers like that that are included in paper packs or just different kits I may get, I pull those aside and put them into an iris container. And when I'm going through to look for papers to use for cut files and things like that, when I may not want to use the whole piece of paper, but I know that I want to use some wood grain, I'll go through there, try to find some papers that match, and then I'll use those to use for my cut files or photo mats and those kind of things. So in Design Space, I had went through and I used the contour feature to cut out just the negative pieces of those letters, and I'm just filling in those voids, and I really think that that helps make the title really pop out from that pattern paper background and just really helps draw your attention to it, and it doesn't quite get so lost on the layout. Next, I'm going to add some pop dots to my photo just to elevate it from the layout and just to really just give it some depth and some interest. And I've sped this part up quite a bit because, as I've mentioned in previous videos, I'm really indecisive when it comes to embellishing, and I didn't edit out or shut off my camera very much during the process of this layout. Normally, if I'm getting frustrated or if I can't figure out how I want to place things, I'll turn the camera off, kind of get my basic design, turn the camera back on, and then get everything laid out the way that I like. But for this, I left it on, and it did take some time, so it is sped up pretty quick. I'm going to use a few different things from the Teresa Collins He Said, She Said collection. That brad is from that collection. I'm going to use a couple more brads. They're just orange, and they match the orange in that pattern paper really well. So I'm just getting that onto the layout, and then I did add a wood grain piece in the corner up there. I'm trimming it down a little bit because it was a little too bulky. I did trim a piece from the cut apart sheet from the Citrus Bliss collection, which is layered underneath that wood grain. I do end up taking that out and just using the wood grain by itself. And now I'm bringing in a couple more brads from that He Said, She Said collection. And it takes some time to get those in. I get them pierced, and then I decide that I want to move them a little bit, or I didn't make the hole big enough. So then I got to go back in and make the hole larger. And so it did take a little while for me to figure out where I want to position those. And I do have a couple things from My Mind's Eye. I think it's the chalkboard collection. Is that what it's called? No, I just looked and it's not chalkboard, it's Chalk Studio. So I use a couple, they're almost like buttons, but they're chipboard material, and it has a diagonal design and a mustache, and it says Dapper on it. I do end up positioning it kind of towards the top of the layout. It's not on there just yet, but you will see it in the close-ups. This sticker sheet, I am not sure what collection it's from or even how long I've had it. It was just grouped with some stickers that I had. I thought the browns matched really well, the greens matched well, so I thought I might be able to incorporate that onto the layout. I do end up using that Hello Handsome that you saw just a second ago, but I end up positioning it into a different spot. That was one of those spots where I could not make the hole big enough for the brad, so I kept having to re-pierce the paper. I ended up just using my scissors to make a big hole in the paper. Now I'm coming in with some My Mind's Eye enamel dots, just trying to figure out where I want to place them, how many I want to put on the layout, moving things around. That's when I decide to get rid of that cut apart sheet. Now I am actually trimming apart part of the packaging from the He Said, She Said collection. I thought it was kind of ironic that The packaging matched actually what was happening in the photo, since that's the game that we were playing, but the label had red on it instead of orange, so it didn't match my color scheme. So I quickly decided that I'm not going to use that. But here I'm coming in with some more of those stickers. That is where I end up leaving that Hello Handsome. I really liked that mustache, but I couldn't figure out a place for it to go. So off camera, I had added some stitching, and I'm just kind of showing you some other elements that I added while the camera was off. There's that Dapper chipboard button, a couple more chevron enamel pieces. There's the stitching that I'm showing you. And in just a moment, I'm going to leave you with some still shots. I so appreciate everyone who watches and leaves comments, and to all my new subscribers, thank you so, so much. I have some really exciting things coming up that I can't wait to share with you. And as always, thank you so, so, so much for watching.